Welcome to The Hero Maker. In this series, we follow Richard's appearances on other shows as he talks about how to grow, play, think, and live like a hero. Join him as he discusses thoughts, principles, and life lessons, all essential for anyone building their heroic brand. All that and more, only on The Hero Maker.
There you go. Now, you said something very interesting. I wanted to get a couple comments from you on that, maybe a couple tips that you could share. You said persuasive learning. You know, you like the idea that you can use words to teach people and persuade people. And so what is a persuasive learning or persuasive teaching, and like what are some couple of tricks that people can use?
So the problem that most people have with education is we have our education colored by our experience with the aptly named education system, right? Where we have our public school system or our college system or whatever it is that is all designed to teach you, this is probably the wrong way to say it, but basic life skills, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of stuff. And the way that you learn those things, right? Like to learn reading, right? You just have to do it, right? It's just rote. You have to learn all the letters. You have to learn all the sounds. You have to learn how to read. I'm currently got 3 children learning to read, so we're doing this over and over and over again. It's not a thing like it's not a persuasive education type thing, right? It's not like you're trying to get someone to change their life. You're just trying to get them to understand the basics so they can function in society, right? And that's what our education system is all designed about. It's designed to create functioning adults. Right? They can read and they can write and they can communicate and they can, do a job and provide value to the society. And there's nothing wrong with that type of education. But when it comes to the type of education that my clients want to do, that's a different type of education entirely, right? That is someone who has a specific problem in their life and they want to solve that problem. And so that's a different type of education, right? Where you have someone who's like, hey, I'm fat, sick, and nearly dead, and I want to be healthy, vibrant, and full of life. Teach me how to make those changes in my life, right? Or I am struggling in a job that I don't like and I don't love, and I want to learn how to get into, say, real estate investing and learn how to invest. I don't know how to do that. I want to learn how to do that. So whatever the thing is that you're teaching people how to do, they have a problem, a place that they're in right now that they don't like, that they don't want to be in, that's causing them pain or causing them suffering in some form or fashion. And you want to help them get to a new place where they're living in what I call the promised land, right? Where that problem doesn't exist for them anymore, and they are dealing with those new higher level problems we talked about earlier. So the path for that education is different, right? You have someone who is in a place, they're struggling with something. Generally speaking, the thing they're struggling with is something that they've created themselves, right? Whether they meant to or not, right? Sometimes if it's a health issue, it might be because of the way that you were raised, and you were raised on, processed foods and other things like that. And you have to re-educate yourself on how to actually take care of your body and your system and stuff like that. So depending on what it is that you teach, you have someone who is suffering from a problem and you want to help them change their life, right? They have to actually change their actions. They have to do something different in order to get different results, right? Whether that's calling on all the local listings for the houses, or changing their diet, or dealing with problems. So you're helping people with psychological issues or relationships, whatever the thing is. They've got things that they have to do, changes that they have to make in their life. So when it comes to educating, you can't approach the education the same way that the education system does when you're teaching, which is, generally speaking, they just give you a how-to, right? This is how you read. This is how you do math. This is how you perform a science experiment, right? And there's nothing wrong with that type of education. It does work. You can help someone through something, but it's missing a lot of parts if you want someone to actually be emotionally invested in changing their own outcome. So when it comes to being emotionally invested in changing the outcome, you have a couple of extra things you have to do when you teach. So what I like to tell people is, if you look at the buying marketplace, right? This is a common example used in car sales, for example, is people will buy because of emotion, and then they justify later with logic, right? So if they're looking at the BMW, for instance, when I bought my first BMW, I bought the BMW for a couple of reasons. One, because it makes you feel like a rich person if you own a BMW, right? If you're honest with yourself, that you feel it's a good feeling to own a BMW, and because of the branding and market and everything that comes along with owning a BMW. So that's the emotional reason. The emotional response for buying a BMW is because of how it makes you feel, how the other people around you respond to you when you drive up in a BMW, right? I actually had some interesting story on that. One of my, the president of the solar company was trying to go to investor meetings, and actually was going to investor meetings, and he was going in an electric vehicle, right? Because we were an electric company, thought it was a good thing. And the problem was that the president of the company was having a problem raising money from investors because they didn't think that our company was successful because he was driving an electric vehicle that was, I can't remember what it was. It was like a Ford E or something like that, but it's an all electric vehicle. And it didn't have the perception of being a successful company because of the car he was driving, which is weird because it fit with our branding. So the president, we had to shift marketing dollars around to help actually pay for a car, and bought or at least a BMW 5 Series to go to the investor meetings in, because the perception changed that much, right? And was able to raise a lot more funds with investors because of that perception, right? So emotionally, you buy something like a BMW because of the way that other people perceive you for it. That's the emotional reason for that decision. Then on the other side of that, after you've bought, say, something like a BMW, when I bought my first BMW, you have the logical justifications, right? I like this car because it's got leather seatings, because it's comfortable, because it's got a 3.0 liter engine, because, it goes 0 to 60 in X number of seconds, right? Whatever the logical reasons are, you can use those. We use those kind of logical reasons to justify that purchase to ourselves and to justify it to our friends and family. Right? Now, that's just a simple example with a car, but we do that with everything, right? Everything that we're doing. If we're buying something or doing something new, we are going to emotionally buy into something first, and then we're going to logically justify that decision for action later. So when it comes to teaching, you have to build your teaching framework to work within that pre-existing human condition, where that's how we make decisions, right? We make decisions emotionally, then we do the thing, and then we justify that thing later with logic. So what I always tell my clients when we actually are designing and developing your course is you start with the why, right? You start with the why for whatever it is, and that's your emotional buy-in. You're going to use language patterns like, imagine what your life will be like when you accomplish this thing, right? When you learn how to buy your first real estate property. So imagine what life is like in the promised land, right? Or imagine what life would be like if you didn't continue, right? If you didn't continue on this path and learn these things, what does life look like if you don't do those things? So you actually build a lot of emotion and story into what does your life look like if you accomplish this transformation, right? If you learn this transformation and actually do something with it, and you want to create that emotional buy-in. After you've created the emotional buy-in, that's when you can get into the how-to, right? Now that you have them emotionally bought in to wanting to learn whatever transformation you're teaching, then you can actually teach them in a transformation, right? Here's how you XYZ, right? And you can actually go through your step-by-step on how to do that. And the other side then is you need to come back, and most educators stop after you teach someone how to do something, but you can't stop there. You have to take the next level, which is the logical justification for change. And I call that the call to adventure, right? You actually have to call someone out and ask them to change and actually do these things. So the first thing you do in your call to adventure is you do some form of a case study, right? A case study where you're going to say, hey, here's Joe Smith, and they accomplished this thing, and here's what their life looked like before, here's what their journey looked like, here's what it looks like afterwards. Here, and you use all of that with data, right? You back it up, like, they had, if you're talking about health, their numbers look like this, or they weighed this much and they lost this much, right? It's specific numbers, specific things that really show how that person accomplished this transformation and what their life looks like now as a result of it. So you're giving someone those logical, like, okay, here's all the sort of the numbers and the details that back up all the things that I learned. The more of that you can do, the better, right? If you have one case study, great. If you have 10 case studies, even better, right? You put those together, and that's actually, you do that as part of your training material, right? As part of the course, that like they actually, the education doesn't stop when you've stopped teaching them how to do a thing. Then you get into the logical justification, which is, like I said, the emotional buy-in, and then, or the logical buy-in with the case studies and whatnot. And then the last part of your training should always be what I call introducing them to the higher level problem, right? So introducing them to the higher level problem is, okay, you're here, right? You've learned how to do this thing. Now here's what the rest of your journey is going to look like, right? So you actually, like, you're standing there in Las Vegas telling them what the drive is going to look like to New York, right? Here's where you're going to run into traffic in St. Louis, and you're going to run into, going to make sure you want to take a left here. Like, here's where you're going to find the alligators on the river, right? Here's all the problems that you're going to run into over this next course of this journey. And that's where you can actually take the time to introduce them to your additional solutions, whether that is, a mastermind like we talked about earlier, or maybe it's not something that you help with at all. Maybe you're like, hey, you're at the point, like in my business, we get someone to the point where they're ready to sell all their products and services. And that's where we say, hey, your next step is you need to have an advertiser come in and actually help you get your advertising going. We don't offer advertising in our agency. So I have recommendations for you. I've got this lady who works this way and works with these kind of people, and this person who works with these kind of people. And I can make introductions for you for those things, right? So you're actually showing them, here's what the next step of your journey is going to look like. And I'll actually sit down with them and show them, like, here's what I would look like for budgets. And, when you're talking to an advertiser, these are the kind of things that they're going to ask you about. So we've already helped you set those things up so you're ready to answer these questions when you talk to an advertiser, and they're going to want to know, they're going to want access to your tracking pixels. So here's how you access those things and give it to them, right? You're showing them what the next step of their journey looks like as part of your education, right? Does that make sense? Because you can't just stop with here's where you're at. You have to show them how they take their next step in the journey, because it doesn't matter what you teach, like literally anything you picked out of that you're teaching, whenever you finish teaching, your customer's journey doesn't stop there. It continues. They still have more things that they have to do and more things that they have to accomplish to move forward. So when it comes to persuasive teaching, you have to bookend your teaching with that emotional buy-in on the front, the logical justification on the other end, and actually calling them to that adventure and showing them what the next steps are.
If you want to hear the rest of this discussion, please check out the link to the full episode in the description below.